serving students with interrupted formal education. A few housekeeping items now before we get started. If you need help troubleshooting during this presentation, of course, we have the chat box, but if you need further, more in-depth technical assistance, please email us at info@brycs.org. We will be recording and archiving this presentation, and all participants will receive a follow-up email with a link to that recorded archive, along with the PowerPoint presentation slides and an evaluation for today's presentation, and any of the shared files located at the bottom right-hand of your screen. We have muted all phone lines, so the only way to communicate with us is through that chat box. And we do have some questions throughout the presentation to engage our audience here, but any Q&A we'll ask to hold until the end of today's presentation. I will also mention that today's presentation is based off of a blog piece that both Brenda and Judith worked on for us. I am copying the link into the chat box now if you wish to read that further or haven't already. And with that, I'll introduce today's experts. Brenda Custodio is a former ESL teacher and building administrator from Columbus, Ohio. She is a frequent presenter with Judy across the country on SIFE and newcomers. And Judy O'Laughlin is a former elementary ESL and special education teacher from New Jersey who now lives in California. They both work together on a book on students with interrupted formal education, which they'll talk about more throughout the presentation. And with that, I will turn it over to you and to Brenda and Judith.
All right. I think you can hear me now. I was muted, so I think I am unmuted. This is Judy O'Laughlin. This is our agenda for today. We're going to look at 2 SIFE learners and discuss what types of additional services they might require. We're going to review challenges faced by refugee and Latino students with interrupted education, list potential services that would support students with interrupted education, share classroom activities to help SIFE learners build resilience. So that is our agenda, and these are our objectives of this webinar. We are going to move forward to identify the causes of interrupted education, look at the scope of the effects of interrupted education, and then discuss the educational challenges that interrupted education may create for the SIFE learner. We're going to provide some recommendations for academic supports for SIFE learners and create a resource list of family and community connections for SIFE learners. And as we go through the webinar, we will refer to certain things that are in the shared files that are yours to download. So I'm turning it over now to Brenda.
Okay, so we based some of our findings on some material that had been written earlier, especially a book written by David and Yvonne Friedman called Closing the Achievement Gap. They were 2 of the first people who wrote about students with limited formal schooling, which was sort of the term before SIFE came along. And a lot of you now know that SIFE has also been added to the acronym category for these students. So when David and Yvonne Friedman did their book, they looked at who these students are, and they said there's 5 areas that these students usually will fit into. First of all, they're mostly recent arrivals. They have interrupted and limited schooling in their native country. They have limited native language literacy. They're usually below grade level in math as well as reading, and also often science, social studies, whatever. And all of these together usually lead to poor academic achievement. I want to add that I read through the list of people who have enrolled in this webinar today, and I saw that probably half maybe are people who work for refugee resettlement organizations or social service agencies. So some of you may not work with K-12 students, as Judy and I have had our experience, but you may be working with the parents of these children, or you may be working with the students who came at an older adolescent age and may not have been able to attend or finish high school. So you're going to have we're going to be talking mainly about K-12, but a lot of what we are discussing today will also refer to the adults that are with these children and the families, and how these people who've not had an opportunity to have a full education, how that can impact them, not just in school, but in life. So we're going to look specifically at two adolescent learners, a Latino student and a refugee student, and we're going to think about what type of special services they might need in a school setting, but also what kinds of non-academic support that we could provide these children so that they're going to get the most out of their education and the most out of their life in their new country. First, we'll look at Diowa. She's a 17-year-old girl who recently arrived from Burma. She's a member of the Karen tribe. She lived in a refugee camp in Thailand for about 5 years. Her family fled Burma because of the political upheaval in her country. Her entire village had been destroyed, as happened in many cases in Burma. She was only able to attend school in the camp about 2 days a week because she was responsible for the care of some of her younger siblings. And we find this a lot, especially with the females. They're expected to, find the firewood, go out and get the help with food, take care of the children, and it also impacts their ability to have an education before they get to the U.S. or to Canada. She wants a high school diploma, but she didn't come with transcripts. Many of the camps do not offer this. The schools often are very hit and miss. They may not have trained teachers, but they may. So every child comes with a little different background. She was placed in ninth grade because of that. She's very shy and she's afraid to talk to her teachers about what can I do to graduate, because she sees that the students her age are probably thinking, junior and senior in high school, and here she is in ninth grade, and she's frustrated, but she's not sure what to do. The other child that we're going to look at is named Ricardo, a 15-year-old boy. He was able to attend school for 4 years, and he had to quit and help work on the farm. When he was 12, she was killed, and he moved in with an uncle. At 15, he was threatened by gang members, which happens a lot in South America. He was told that if he didn't join, he was going to be shot. So his uncle had to pay a to help Ricardo escape. He made a dangerous journey across America and across Mexico to try to be reunited with a father that his mother had told him about, but he had never actually met. And after 8 months, he crossed the border into Texas, where he was apprehended. He spent 2 months in a detention center before the separation of families. Then he was eventually sent to Wisconsin to be with his father once they were able to give him. He was approved. Dad had since married, he had other children. The situation was very uncomfortable, and finally he decided he was just going to leave Dad. He moved to a nearby state and with another uncle of his other side. He's now in high school, but obviously with his interrupted schooling and also all the trauma that he's been facing, he's going to have a very difficult time in school. We want you to just think about Diowa and Ricardo. What challenges do you think they are facing in school? What challenges are they facing in their apartment complex or with their peers? What kind of social issue are they going to have in school? What type of programming might they need that could help them bridge that gap? And then what kind of non-academic support should a school have to try to hook these children up with outside agencies and so on? You could just think about this. You've got some you might add it to the box. I'll give you a couple minutes to think about this.
Okay. So right in the chat, we ask you to think of special services. As Brenda mentioned, these two students need to be successful in an academic. With adults, services are for individuals with similar backgrounds. We'll give you about 2 minutes. We can chat about the opportunity box, put in later, time for Q&A. I'll talk about this. So one of our participants indicated they want to link students up to community centers and activities throughout the community. That would be sports, theater, mentors, culturation, help tutors. When we were writing our book, we also found programs that were model pro to do very much what you're describing here, including one in Oregon that focused on Saturday to do just that combination of art and activities. Group counseling being mentioned, extracurricular activities, right? So ways to develop language and communicate with others. After school course, which we also saw some videos from a program which I think is still in existence as the leader has got stayed. Okay, so I think it's an idea. I think my students, and so here's a little bit of that we have put together, and it aligns very nicely with what you have here. I think that academic supports should include sheltered content classes, language literacy classes, being written about using native language to enhance and encourage the development of English language, development of a content, so content, in support of development. Second language class, tutoring, catch up, during and after school, maybe before school, depending upon the ability of the or the to get to school to get some tutoring, academic support, counseling for trauma, grief, and the adjustment to the new environment, helping students tap their internal resources, which we will reference later as I have on family counseling and legal assistance for immigration, which is obviously very important in today's current climate for immigrants within the U.S. And I'll turn this back over to Brenda.
Okay, so unfortunately, in many cases, it's impossible to find who has that interruption. Some school districts all students when they enter and keeping track of data, writing down how much school the students have had and where, how many days a week. But very many schools and states do that data. You can't just tell by language students of 3 kids here who have everything. It's not that easy. You can't go by country, you can't go by language. It has to be done on an individual basis. So what we recommended is that each school district keep some data on who are students. And we have the form that's on here is also files form the lower corner. These are some questions you might want to ask your student to add. Not all of these, which would be appropriate district, but to know which have a good education and which had that interrupted schooling would definitely help the teachers. Another case that we need to think about is sometimes the school, the enrollment center data, but have a teacher. So that the teacher which needs some extra. So sample questions, you can read them on that other page, too small. So can your child read in her native language? That is really important because, especially if you're trying to do a program or you aren't, we know from research that who can read a language learn their new and learn to write much in English. Already got basic skills to transfer to new language. You have to not only language, but also at the same time, it's a more lengthy process. This also is for adults. At what age did you begin to attend school? Some children in some countries start very young, some children start much later. And what was the last your child attended? Was there a time I was unable to attend for how long? Sometimes parents don't send for many, it's going to prevent them from being enrolled or be looked at in a need. But we need explain that this is for the information to know how to best serve that we're not trying to judge the child or the parent anyway. I'm going to look at two different very quickly. You have some information, some background working with refugees, especially since funded by the Office of So we know that the refugee is somewhere 17 to 20 million. It depends on the official records from the UN and so on. But we know the countries with the highest number of refugees certainly would be Syria, number one, South Sudan, and then Sudan, Afghanistan, and Somalia. So when you put these together, you've got almost 10 people right here. So far, the U.S. has resettled around 15,000 in the fiscal year of 20. We're hoping at least that many or more will be settled next year. As those children come, they're the ones who are most likely to have interrupted formal education. And some of the reasons are a lot of these children spent time without going to school before they left their home country, because in many cases, when you are needed to leave your country, it's because the situation has gotten so bad that you just can't stay. So for most of these students, there's going to be months or even years when mom and dad kept them at home. It was too dangerous to be outside. School might have closed. It might have been intermittent. So they have to think of, they want to keep their children safe. So they're probably not going to have a good education before they even leave their home country. Then they're fleeing. They're trying to get to some relative stability. They get to a rec camp. It takes a while to settle in. And then in the camps, there's limited opportunities for education. Obviously, they're dealing with trauma, both before, during, and after the time in the camp and during resettlement. Poor, overcrowded facilities. I was just listening to a refugee from South Sudan the other day, and he was talking about the fact that their school was totally outside. The children had no books. The teacher wrote on a chalkboard, and the children had to in the sand because that was the only way that they could copy. So it was, these children are the ones who's going to come, and to try to fit into school in a Western society is a huge traumatic experience for them. And this is just two pictures of two children in refugee camp schools. Very typical situations. We also want to think about our Latino students. For most of them, they are not refugees, although many of them are asking for political asylum when they cross the border, so they could eventually become asylees. But for many Latin American countries, it is the standard that only 8 to 9 years of schooling is required. They may have high school free, but it isn't a requirement. The fees for books, uniforms, and tests may keep children from being able to attend school on a regular basis. They may be fleeing from gang violence, and it keeps them at home. It's common for one person from each family to come to the U.S. get a job, send money back home. That's the way that many of our Central American societies have survived for a long time. Many teens, especially the males, they say, "Okay, I've finished grade 9. It's time to go north and get a job." Upon arrival, they find out that they're expected to be back in school till they're either 18 or complete grade 12, and that becomes um, a shock for them. They may become frustrated and angry. They may not even enroll. In fact, one study showed that only from 40 to 85% of the people who come, especially the boys, never bother to enroll, or they enroll and drop out. If they enroll, they might have to repeat some classes because they may not have come with a transcript or the requirements are different. So lots and lots of reasons why these students are coming with an interrupted education.
Okay, so what issues have we found that may be unique to SIFE? Well, they're frequently suffering from stress-related issues, and you can see from what Brenda has told you about coming to America and why they would have stress-related issues, including what we've been seeing on the news in the past few weeks. They have special literacy and academic requirements due to missing years of school, and the uniqueness of each of the students' stories makes their literacy and academic needs different from other refugees, other SIFE students that you will find in your classroom or in a special program, so that you have unique situations for each of the students that you would be working with. They may experience frequent and strong bouts of frustration, among other things, because they can't match what they see the peers in a mainstream classroom or a content middle school or high school classroom are able to do, that they cannot do at this time. And obviously, as Brenda has indicated earlier, they have a much higher rate of dropping out. So this is a little bit of a quote from something we've written in our book, that we believe the programming that's designed for English language learners with academic skills and first language literacy, as well as for the students who have been in Western schools for most, if not all, of their education, which is the story for many of the ESL students in California, is not sufficient for most students with interrupted schooling. It just doesn't match their needs. So here's a quote from our book: "The gap between what students are expected to be able to do and the skill set that students have at their disposal is often too great, and the students frequently give up." One study from the Pew Research Center found that the dropout rate for teens with school problems before migration is in excess of 70%, in comparison with 8% for other foreign-born youth. And this is from 2005, and that statistic may even be higher if we were to research it at this point. This is something that I've often thought about too, listening to Jim Cummins and Virginia Collier. Time is a critical factor. They have such significant gaps in their formal schooling. They may need 10 years and sometimes even more to acquire the academic language proficiency that enables them to understand and express concepts and ideas that are relative and relevant to long-term success in school. It's almost double the catch-up period predicted for students who have literacy skills in their first language. Cummins has often compared it to a train that's left the station and these students are running behind it to try and catch up. And that visual perfectly explains what a difficult feeling it is for SIFE students to know that catching up is always in front of them, and they are constantly trying to close that gap from where they are to where they need to be. Okay.
And I just want to add, for those of you that are working with adults, it's even more frustrating trying to help adults catch up, because for our K-12 students, they're usually in an English-speaking environment a large chunk of their day, 6, 7, 8 hours. For an adult, they may have 2 hours, 3 days a week of some kind of English instruction, and it's just so much more difficult for them, especially if they haven't had a good, strong educational background. So what we're going to be looking at right now is what kinds of things a school could do to support these students, especially academic programming. Some schools have wonderful programming with newcomer services and so on. Others, especially those who have smaller numbers or newer arrivals that they're not used to having in their schools, they may not offer quite as many of these services. So these are the ones that we recommend. If we're going too quickly, you've got the PowerPoint in the shared file box that you can go back and copy these if you want to share them with your local school district. So first of all, you need to start at the district level. Often these students are put in an ESL class, and the ESL teacher is the one that's trying to solve all of the issues that these children are dealing with, but one person cannot do all of this. So we need to find people at the top who are willing to put time and money and personnel into helping out these students. So first of all, you need training for those personnel on how to work with SIFE. You need to develop an atmosphere of acceptance and diversity in the schools. We need programming options that help the students with not just literacy development in their first language and in English, but also to fill in science and math and social studies, because these children don't just sit in an English class all day. They may get 1 or 2 hours, but the rest of the time they're out in mainstream classes trying to survive with the little that they brought with them. So it's the teacher's job and the district's job to find ways to help these students to catch up. And then expanded learning opportunities. And I know as we read through the chat box of all the ideas that you guys had, what these students need more than anything is just time. They have the mental ability, they just have been cheated out of time for an education. So every way that we can find to fill in those gaps with either after school, Saturday, tutoring during study hall, summer school, they need time to catch up to the other students. Then at the school level, again, we want an atmosphere of acceptance. The students know that they are cared about, that they are welcome, that somebody is there to help them. If they have an issue, who can you go to? They need to have some little nest that they feel comfortable. You need a knowledgeable and caring staff. You need courses that assist students to make that transition from what they know now to what they need to be able to do. I see this especially in math and especially at the high school. I don't know how many times we do these workshops and the teachers will say, the lowest math available at high school is algebra. And for a student who's still learning basic math skills and basic math concepts, they're dying. They don't know the difference in a 1 and a 2 and an X and a Y. They need some kind of a transitional math course. They need scheduling options, especially for kids who are older and who need to work. Some of these children are on their own, and if they don't work, they don't have a place to live and they don't have a place to eat. So we need to either let them come to school late, leave early, whatever, somehow where they can get an education and continue to meet their needs. And then finally, at the classroom level, activating prior knowledge. They don't come as blank slates. They don't come empty. These kids know more about survival than most of us will ever know. But it's the academics that they're missing. So we need to help them to think about what you already know and then move it into the academic sphere. We need to build background in each lesson. What do you already know about this? What do you need to know now? What's the next thing you want to learn? We need to choose support materials that are grade appropriate. And in too many schools, I see them just giving them their textbook and they just have to try to figure out a way to survive, and it's just not going to happen that way. There are so many wonderful picture books and especially science and social studies books available out there for these children that are visually appealing and also build those basic skills that they need. We need to limit the amount of new information and the new vocabulary they get every day. lots and lots and lots of visuals. There is so much out there now, just anything you can imagine. Pull it up on Google Images or YouTube, and you can help them to understand the concepts much easier when you use visuals. And you need adapting assessments and grading. You know, we're trying to help the students to survive, not kill them before they end the school year. And then finally, classroom level support. And there are so many of these, but hands-on and group work, if they can work together with their peers, they feel much more comfortable and they feel much more accepted. Frequent and informal comprehension checks is also something that we recommend. And then we have some non-academic supports. So these would be examples of making sure we have the atmosphere of acceptance we've mentioned before, schedules that accommodate the students at work, connecting them to social services, especially for our undocumented students. They don't qualify for many of the types of things that refugee students do. So it's finding out which organizations out there work with which group of people, helping the children, helping their parents, finding counseling and housing and food, and then health supports, especially for students who don't have insurance. And then we're going to talk later in a lot more detail about non-physical supports that include belonging, resilience, and adjustment. And then we have some community level supports. And Judy mentioned earlier that as we were doing research for our book, we looked around the country to find places that we thought were doing good things with connecting with the community. We saw lots and lots of places that have tutoring, often run by volunteers or run by short-term grants and so on, offering translations for parent conferences, transportation for parents to school events, helping with planning for the post-secondary world, because college here is so totally different than it is in most other countries, and helping students to realize that an 8th grade education in the U.S. is not going to do it. You must have a high school diploma for the basic level of a job, and then hopefully for many of our children, we want them to go on to college if possible. How do you fill out those college applications? How do you fill out the FAFSA forms? All those kinds of things. Non-academic supports, clothing and school supplies. The school where I used to work has a room in the building that's just clothing and shoes and school supplies and hygiene products and so on for the children. Giving transportation to children signing up for the driver's license or going to job interviews, mentoring programs, bringing health services right into the school, because trying to get them to go out is so complicated, but if you can bring it into the school, that would be wonderful. And examples of community support, this school I was just mentioning that had the in-school store, it was started by a United Way grant, and it just offers the students a chance. You know, they just come to the counselor or the office and say, I need this or this, and we take them to the store and they get what they need. We also saw 2 programs that offered reading support. One was in Beaverton, Oregon, the Saturday Newcomer Academy. I saw someone is on here from Beaverton. And the Global Village Project in Atlanta for refugee girls. So there's a lot of programs out there that is offering support to build those literacy skills, because in the K-12 setting, if you can't read, you are not going to survive. Okay, and now we're going to talk about resilience. Judy's done a lot of work on this, and she's going to be our expert today.
Okay. Oops. Let me go back. This is a wheel about resilience and all the different aspects that might fit into working on resilience. I'm going to focus on the I Have, I Am, I Can, which is based on research done by Edith Gottberg in a European setting for native speakers of the language. But there's been some recent articles related to this research project and expanding on it for non-native speakers. So When you look at this wheel, you looking at sense of humor, self-belief, ability to problem solve, optimism, building all these things into the learner. So that somebody mentioned about getting involved in gangs because of frustration. And yes, this is something to think about building up the self-esteem of the learner and the optimistic look towards the future that will help him. Emotional awareness, control, self-control to situations that are frustrating. And so this is all part of the idea of building up your resilience. One other thing that was mentioned by somebody in the chat box was, where do they find these books? We have listed in the shared files a list of books that you can download and go through and see. These are books that we have personally used in workshops we've given for different content, different topics, as examples of building language and preparing students for academic settings. So you might want to take a look at that list or download it for yourself in the future so that you know a little bit more about it. Factors that impact the need for resilience include the environmental factors that are issues for many of the students, is that they come here with extreme poverty, and they may live in areas or communities of cities where there is a lot of violence around them. So they're facing societal violence. They may also be facing domestic violence because of all the frustration of all the things they've had to face and the hurdles they face to get to the United States. The issues of drugs and the possibility of buying and selling drugs, which are a problem for the students that come here, their immigration status, living in fear all the time of being deported or having their parents deported and then not knowing where they can go, bullying in the school, sometimes homelessness, and self-esteem. So when we look at the I have, I am, I can model, we'll directly talk about self-esteem and building that. Educational factors include peer pressure, the academic rigor of schools, obviously the language barrier, grades and how the school attempts to grade them and whether or not they are graded differently until they are ready to be graded along with others. Test scores, the graduation requirements, and motivation. And one thing that I want to mention here about educational factors that Brenda mentioned in one of her earlier things at the school level was the community of learners. Something that's been written about for a long time was the idea that when a student walks into the school, does that school represent him in some way? Does the school look welcoming? Is his culture acknowledged and accepted in some way? And it can be from any kind of an artifact, a map, a flag, things that are making it more acceptable and comfortable for a new student to enter the school. Okay, so here are the 3 strategies to help SIFE learners build resilience. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to look at each one from the teacher viewpoint and then from the student viewpoint, and then break it down a little bit further. So the first strategy, the strategy of I have, is that teachers and the school need to build strong relationships with newcomers and their families so that they know that they have someone they can go to when they have questions, concerns, issues. From the student's viewpoint, it's what are the resources and the people available that are there to offer me support when I need it. And this can be an ongoing I have, a list that begins with the I have for immediate and continues through the whole year, school year, for how I've built up these resources of people and things that I have to help support me. Strategy 2 is I am, the power of the narrative, positive characteristics the newcomer sees in himself. And I'll talk a little bit more of that on future slides. So who am I and what am I and what do I possess within me that will help me succeed? And so that becomes a personal narrative and many different ways to write or draw or create a collage of that narrative that is at the beginning and changes over time for who I am. And finally, strategy 3, using problem-based models of instruction for I can. So what can I do right now? What are the skills that I have to deal with social interactions, problem solving in school? What can I do? And what do I hope to do in the future? So here's the basis for the I have, I am, I can model. Then if you're looking at I have strategy 1, you would focus on the strengths of the students, what the students themselves bring through their experiences and abilities. And remember to mention that none of these students is a blank slate. And that's a misconception that often permeates schools where teachers haven't been prepared to work with English learners. They are not blank slates. They have a myriad of experiences that they bring to the classroom, and to bring those out with what they have and can do is really important. They need to be able to have experiences and opportunities to share what they already know and can do. And then also making connections to family, to the ethnic community, to their religious beliefs, and to skills that are positive influences. These are what I have. This is my bag of things that I have to help me support what I'm doing in school and outside of school. And I can reach into that bag and pull out something and a name of someone or something else that will help me. Then here's the graphic organizer that can be used for the I have. So telling about the people or groups that the student has, and starting from maybe a baseline of what I have and filling out parts of this graphic organizer, and then dipping back into it periodically to see how the I have has increased. The I am is an interesting thing about thinking about the story, the power of the narrative. To think about and recognize the value of others to their well-being, and to read stories of other people who have overcome difficulties and how they did it. Reading about other immigrants through autobiographies, biographies, and fictionalized accounts of migration can be very helpful. So sometimes we've used the book called Malala, about Malala's experience, and that's on our list. But there are other books too that are out there that would help for this. Migration narratives come in all kinds of ways, in books, in short stories, articles that are appropriate for any age and reading level. They have a benefit of providing practice in reading, building vocabulary, and then for students writing their own personal narratives. A good article is in the Journal of Adolescent and Adult Literacy, and this project by Professor Stewart in 2015 was done with actually picture books and other narratives, and these were with adult learners to think about the I am. Another book that recently came out, it came out for American experiences and experiences in other countries. There were 2 books written by Chelsea Clinton, they're both called She Persisted. One is about American experiences, and the other one is about experiences outside of the U.S. And it's mainly aimed at girls and the idea of how women have been able to persist to succeed. So those all fit into the I am narrative. And in going back to the idea of being involved in gangs and getting into trouble, is once you know who you are and what you can do, this becomes much less powerful, the draw of a gang for a refugee student. The I can is the final one for strategies, and it's a resiliency exercise. They think of what they can already do and what they want to do and what they want to be in the future. They can list some short-term and long-term goals, and then list how they can reach them. And you can create a different kind of graphic organizer for this as well, a web or another chart or a T-chart for students to look at this, to continually add to it. And keep these ideas in a notebook for their I have, I am, I can. So I want a job for a high school student that pays more money than working in McDonald's. So what will I do? And that would be one I can. And it's a good time to begin to talk with high school students about employment, education, and how they will be able to support themselves and their families in the U.S. So that's strategy 3, I can. I have also, going back to that, I have seen where an adult school program in New York State where the teacher put up butcher block paper across a long wall, and the students looked at what I had in my own country, and drew a map of their country on the wall on the butcher paper, and next to it about what they have in their new environment in the US. And so the mural stayed up for months, and they kept adding to that mural and expanding upon the community resources that they had in their mapping. And so this was a student who was doing some research for her master's thesis on these students. And I think this was a great way to visually represent the I have. And just before I go to this, also the I am, I have, actually in Columbus, where Brenda lives, one of the teachers sent me some collages that her students had done about the I have, I am, I can, and they had outlines of their bodies, and they put in different aspects of I have, I am, I can, from pictures they had cut out of magazines, along with some simple sentences. They were all pretty much beginners, and so they were able to visually represent I have, I am, I can. Here on this picture, so I'm up to here, helping students break through this barrier is critical to resilience. So what students can do right now, and this is another way to represent it, is within this red circle, and the barrier is what separates it from what they are not yet able to do. And I keep thinking of different words from wall and barrier, and I think you would want to think about that too, because you don't want a wall that you can't get over or under or through. You want something that you can see through to what you next would be able to do. So always thinking in the positive is very important. And I think that anything from I have, I am, I can, as well as this diagram, can be linked to any content learning that you're doing, so that you have the social and affective learning that works along with content learning. Okay, so the last thing you want to think about is a school resiliency checklist. Creating one. We've put a couple of questions here, but there are many more you can develop to reflect on whether or not your school will be a safe community place for your students to feel that they are accepted, that their needs are going to be met, and they are welcomed. So my school is viewed as a safe place for students and their families. Is it open for families to come in and talk to the teacher? Many families feel that the school is not a place they can enter because of their limited language, and in their home country they may have sent their children to school and then not entered the school. But here we welcome families into the school. The school is visibly welcoming and visually welcoming to all cultures, and that goes back to creating a community of learners. When you walk in a school, what do you see? Do you only see a cabinet filled with sports trophies? Do you see art from various cultures and various viewpoints? Do you see flags from different cultures? So is it a visually welcoming place? Students and their families are viewed as assets to the community. They're not just, oh, wow, just another new immigrant coming to our school. And I've heard that said in places, and we don't want to ever have that happen. And the school provides outreach and connections to community services and to the community, to the different communities and sub-communities within the larger community of the new immigrant population. So at this point, I'm just going to mention, this is our book, Students with Interrupted Formal Education, where they are and what they need. We have worked on an introduction to SIFE, the Latinos with Interrupted Education, which is Brenda is very, very familiar with, the unique issues of refugee children, and providing social emotional support, developing resilient students, which I've been working on and continue to work on for more ideas and more classroom instruction related to social and emotional support. And then providing academic support programming and curriculum, which we both worked on, in terms of modifying instructional planning tools for this group of students. Okay, at this point, we're both turning it over to questions. We can take a look in the chat pod for any questions that you have. And any unanswered questions when we're through will be posted and responded to on BRYCS blog, which is listed here. So, Brenda, should we take a look at some of these?
Well, one person asked about where we could find books, and I think they're just specifically like the social studies and science books that have lots of pictures and so on. I know that Benchmark and National Geographic have tons of these books that are written at all different grade levels. A lot of them are very appropriate for high school, although they may be at second or third grade reading level, because the content is grade level. It's just the reading level is at the appropriate for the children.
Yeah, Pearson had Anna Chameau, before she passed away, did a two-book history book series that it's about American history that parallels American history course in middle school or high school. That's modified for different learners. There is through Oxford both a science dictionary and a math dictionary, and we can actually we can put together or post links or names for these as well. Yeah, I would agree with you, Brenda. I think Benchmark's a good resource. National Geographic is a very good resource for new learners. The Oxford Picture Dictionary in the content areas through Oxford up through grade 8 was a fairly good, it was a really relevant material to learning some very basic information, very visual for content. They also have an adult version for the Oxford Picture Dictionary that is often used in adult programs for newcomers. Mostly what we have focused on are picture books that are, one of the things we both look at is that the picture book does not dummy down the information, nor does it represent the characters or the pictures and illustrations that would look like elementary school or childish. So we're really careful about that, and that's in our list as well.
Somebody mentioned the Newcomer Academy. Both Judy and I have visited the International Newcomer Academy in Fort Worth. We were very impressed. I actually helped to set up and worked at a newcomer school in Columbus, Ohio. I think they are wonderful for brand new students. They give them that transition time to cut a little bit of the trauma that they're going through if you jump right into a regular mainstream school. And I've also, and Judy and I both have visited some of the newcomer schools that are out of New York City, but there's some in
this one in Oakland, California. We visited.
Yeah, we went to one in Oakland. Oh God, I can't think of the name of it. Newcomer Internationals, I think, or Internationals Newcomers. I can't remember what the name of it is. Oh, my mind's a blank right now. There's like 20 of them across the country.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you. One of the things somebody mentioned, Stacy here mentioned, was that the trauma counseling, and I definitely agree with you. I found that, I had students when I taught in New Jersey. I had one student kind of burned in my memory who experienced trauma from moving out of her home country to the United States from kindergarten up to third grade, where she didn't utter a word. And I went to the child study team, and they had no trauma training in terms of non-native speakers and non-native speaking families. And I went with her mom, and I think this is a really big thing, is that we have to really push for, at the school level, for counselors to attend trauma training for refugees and immigrants coming to the United States. I was really, really surprised that in our counselor's tool of bags, a bag of tools, tool of bags, bag of tools, she didn't have anything to help a non-native speaker. And we kind of muddled through it together. I went to her for her expertise. So I think this is really important, and that's a good point. Anything else you see, Brenda, that you want to comment on?
Well, I just want to add that I know that trauma is a big topic right now, and a lot of school counselors are getting trained in it, but they may not necessarily have the training to work with culturally diverse students who are facing trauma, or they may not be able to connect to the parents who may not speak English. Those kinds of issues are still very, very strong out there. I did remember the name of that group. It's called the Internationals Network, and they are a number of schools across the country, mainly East Coast and West Coast, that have newcomer programs, and they have lots of resources. Someone asked about grants. I sure don't know of any, but doesn't hurt to ask. I would check with foundations and so on. Sometimes the smaller foundations are more likely than the larger ones to provide assistance in this. But helping children who are facing trauma, facing the integration issues and so on, there are lots of organizations out there right now who are very concerned and interested in this. And I think you're going to get some people that you might not have had 4 or 5 years ago that now want to help and want to support these children.
Yeah, and I would think even the Office of English Language Acquisition does provide grants, and I would check their website, OELA, and see if they have any smaller grants. I know they just issued some grants for building literacy, but see if they have any smaller grants, or even write to them and ask them about, will they be providing a grant to help, a smaller grant to help you get started with the Newcomer Center or something like that. They usually pair the school district with a university. So I would look toward a university in your area and go to speak to someone in the TESOL department and talk about possibly working together toward developing a grant, a proposal that you would bring to something like OELA or somewhere else. And they may even have small funding that might be helpful in the grants. So they would need, a pre-test and post-test data, but it would help you get started on getting a program together. One other thing, Laura mentioned, the I have, I am, I can. So I think that what I presented for you was very small amount of information about I have, I am, I can. I think expanding on that to decide what you're looking for I have in terms of the both experiences and knowledge that the student has. And this doesn't just come immediately to them, and it may not be something that they can write in words, but may be able to draw, may be able to, present in different ways. So I guess what I'm saying is that this is a very basic information about it. I've been actually working on this for months now to add to, how you use this three-prong resilience piece to help your students in different ways. Through actually attending workshops and watching what other people do to develop language in their classrooms and thinking about how I can put that into this model. And knowing that it has to be a fluid model, that it doesn't stop with who I am right this minute. And that's the thing that builds on it, is the student needs to know that he's developed his knowledge. We had one article from Color in Colorado that is very helpful in learning more about SIFE learners, and that's in the shared files as well. And then there is also a WIDA article. The WIDA Consortium has a list of articles and blogs that they put together on their website that anyone can open and read. And we suggest that you read both of those. to know a little bit more.
The WIDA is in the shared files. The Kohler in Colorado is up in the chat box under John's name. He's given you
Okay.
2 links. The second link there is the Kohler in Colorado article on SIFE. The first link is something that comes out of the state of Washington. It's called The Heart of Learning and Teaching, and it is an amazing document about working with trauma and helping students who have experienced trauma. It is probably like 200 pages, and it's wonderful. So both those 2 links, you might want to click on those before you go away from the presentation today, and make sure you get access to that. I saw Tara had a question about the age limit for high school. That is set by each individual state. I know in Ohio, it's a person cannot attend school. Well, the state will not pay for someone to attend school after their 22nd birthday. If the school district wants the child to come, they can come till they retire, but most schools are not going to have students that they're not going to get money for. So it's strictly a money situation. And why they set that age limit, I don't know. It was done probably 100 years ago. The only way that's ever going to be changed is at the state level through some kind of advocacy. I don't necessarily see it changing. The issue that most of our students have is the fact that the federal government and the states want children to get in and out of high school in 4 years, and they rate a high school on how many students graduate in that 4-year time period. And that's what kills these students with interrupted schooling, because it's not that they can't finish high school, it's that they can't do it in 4 years. If we just give them a little extra time, they'd probably be fine. So some schools, especially I was talking about that Internationals Network, they encourage students to stay 5 or even 6 years, and they do a lot of advocacy at the state level so that those schools do not get punished for keeping kids longer than the 4 years. It just doesn't happen in most other states. These are, our SIFE students are maybe 5% of our ESL population or 10% of our ESL population. So because it's such a small number of students, the state tends to ignore them.
Yeah, and I think in California, they're looking toward a fluid movement. These students in adult education programs to be able to, there's a bill pending right now to be able to, once they have passed their non-credit courses, to be able to move into credit community college so that they're not lost, or they have, this impetus to keep going and to not give up and drop out. And the bill is almost ready to be passed. So it's something you might think about for your own state. Heather indicated that she's in a small rural high school on the eastern shore of Maryland. Heather, Washington College is on the eastern shore. I'm wondering if you can go to Washington College to see if they have any grants. I used to know a professor there, Richard Gillen, and I don't know if he's retired yet or not, and in the English department there. But that might be a place you might want to go and find out about whether or not they would help you support a newcomer program for you. And that's about the last one that I've seen. Do you see anything else, Brenda, you want to respond to?
Yes, Yinka mentioned students who are not at the right age on their documents. She said that there are students who are coming and they're overestimated their age. I found, especially with our refugee children, they were usually the opposite. Parents often lowered the age of their children because they wanted to make sure they were still able to come with them and didn't get age out when the parents were finally able to get resettled. And I have found that judges and schools are not willing to change the age of that child no matter what it says on their documents. That's what they are. So I don't know. I don't know what you can do, because once you get a piece of paper that says a person's a certain age, whether it's right or not, the school can change when they serve them, but they can't actually change their age. So it does become a real issue. So wish I could be a better answer, but I don't have one.
Dawa mentions to Heather that about peer mentoring, and this is a really good thing to mention as well, is that not only out of your student body in your high school to match up your SIFE student with a peer mentor of the same age and grade, and do some training, and as well as reaching out to a college to see if there were any college students who are in the education department who want to be peer mentors for your students as well.
Right. Right.
Okay. Thank you both, Brenda and Judith, for spending this hour with us and sharing your knowledge about SIFE students. On the screen here, you'll see our website, our email address, and our 1-800 toll-free number. If you have additional questions and you would like to link up with Brenda or Judith, please feel free to contact BRYCS in either way, and we'll make sure to get you connected with these two. And with that, I will close today's presentation. Thank you all for joining us. You may be redirected to an evaluation when the presentation closes. If you have time, please do provide your feedback. If not, you will receive a follow-up email with that same evaluation. Thank you again for joining us today, and hope you can join us for future webinars.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.